Welcome to Spotlight Reads. In this episode, we examine George Orwell's Animal Farm not as a story, but as a system. We will not be focusing on the morality of any individual characters. Instead, our focus is on the mechanisms of control. You see, this analysis isn't about villains taking power. It is about the quiet, deliberate process by which a system reorganizes the very tools of thought, language, memory, and obedience. We're going to observe how one form of power is dismantled and then replaced by another, all while using the language of liberation. This is an examination of structure. Our examination is going to proceed through 6 distinct stages. We'll begin with the promise of simplicity. From there, we'll analyze language as a weapon. Then we will observe the use of fear without chaos and the process of the erasure of memory. Finally, we'll examine the establishment of an inevitable hierarchy and how, in its final form, the system endures. We are going to deconstruct the system, piece by piece, to understand exactly how it functions. Revolutions, you see, don't begin with complex ideology. They begin with a simple, powerful promise. The system is built on a truth that's easy to understand and emotionally powerful. Its greatest strength is its simplicity. This was the foundational principle, a clear and absolute statement. It required no interpretation. Its simplicity created immediate trust, bypassing any need for complex, factual proof. And that's because a simple promise is processed emotionally. It's believed much more quickly than a complex truth, which has to be processed intellectually. So the first casualty of this new system is complexity. The initial laws, the 7 commandments, they had nuance, but they were very quickly condensed into a single, binary maxim, a slogan that requires no thought. It only requires repetition. And here we see a foundational mechanism of control in action. Repetition replaces debate. You see, a slogan, when it's repeated with enough frequency and enough volume, doesn't serve to convince, it serves to prevent thought. It becomes a barrier to dissent, a tool for simply ending any real discussion. Now, the next step in systemic control is to alter the very tools the population uses to understand its own reality. If you can control what words mean, well, you can control what people are able to think. The system begins to re-engineer language itself. The laws were not erased, they were edited. The original commandment is absolute. No animal shall sleep in a bed. But the system introduces a qualifier, with sheets. This small addition fundamentally alters the rule, but it preserves the illusion that the original law is still intact. It's a modification that claims to be nothing more than a clarification. And this process is repeated. The prohibition against alcohol is amended with 2 words, to excess. This gives the new ruling class permission to do the very thing it was supposed to abolish. And the amendment is presented not as a violation of the law, but as the law's truest interpretation. This final alteration is what justifies the public executions. By adding without cause, the system gives itself the authority to define what a valid cause is. Killing is no longer forbidden. It is now simply an administrative procedure. By changing the words, the system changes what is permissible. This is a protocol for altering truth itself. An effective system of control doesn't require a constant, overt violence. No. It requires an environment where life appears normal, yet dissent is structurally impossible. The system cultivates fear, but it does so without disrupting routine. The goal is not chaos. The goal is quiet, predictable obedience. Fear is maintained through the very structure of daily life. The constant presence of the dogs provides a silent, physical threat. The rhetorical threat of Jones's return provides an ideological one, shutting down any questions. The system removes the platform for opposition by just abolishing debate. And finally, the public executions serve as an absolute demonstration of the system's power. There is no chaos here. There is only order, an order enforced by the clear consequences of stepping out of line. Once language is controlled, and an architecture of fear is established, the next mechanism is the active erasure and replacement of collective memory. The first obstacle to this process is an individual's memory based on direct personal experience. Boxer remembers what he saw. His memory is a fixed point of data that contradicts the new narrative. The system responds by replacing that personal memory with an official, unchallengeable narrative. Notice, Sweela doesn't argue with Boxer's memory. He simply invalidates it by citing a higher authority. The personal is replaced by the official. When there is no physical record, memory becomes flexible. The past is no longer a fixed point of reference. It becomes whatever the leadership declares it to be. And when the system can control the past, it has no need to justify its actions in the present. It simply rewrites history to fit its needs. The initial promise of equality is not dismantled by a single act of betrayal. It's dismantled by the deliberate, step-by-step construction of a new, rigid hierarchy. This is not an accident, it is an engineering process. Hierarchy is introduced as a series of logical necessities. First, leadership is claimed for the good of the farm. Then, superior resources are claimed as essential for the leaders to function. Then, superior living conditions are claimed as fitting for the dignity of that leadership. Each step is justified as necessary for the collective good, making the construction of the new class structure seem inevitable. And the results of this process are clear. The system creates a new elite. Sweeler referred to the reduction of rations as a readjustment. This is an example of administrative language. It's used to mask the reality of systemic inequality. It's not a reduction, it's a recalibration of the system. We will now connect the mechanisms that we have observed. This is the synthesis. This is how the system achieves its final, stable form. First, the simple promise of equality was dismantled. It was replaced with a simple slogan, a tool designed for thought termination. Second, language was re-engineered. By altering the words, the system altered the very tools for perceiving reality, making truth dependent on official declaration. Third, memory was erased. With the past made fluid, the system could not be judged against its own history, and so accountability was removed. And finally, fear and hierarchy were normalized. Intimidation and inequality were not presented as oppression, but as the necessary architecture for stability. The end result of these mechanisms is a system that is perfectly efficient, perfectly stable, and a perfect replica of the one it replaced. This was Spotlight Reads, Face the System. Animal Farm is not a story about animals. It is a structural diagnosis of how power reorganizes itself after revolutions. Equality does not disappear overnight. It is slowly redefined, adjusted, and normalized. Rules are not removed, they are rewritten. Language becomes flexible. Memory becomes selective. The most dangerous phase is not violence. It is calm administration. When no one questions the rules anymore, power no longer needs force. Animal Farm shows us that oppression does not arrive shouting. It arrives explaining itself, patiently, reasonably, and repeatedly. This is not a failure of ideals. It is the success of systems.